Pakistanis pay the price for the gas-guzzling pickup trucks driving around Montana and Texas and Georgia. And for that matter,
But since it's
Alberta.
you, I didn't make that argument. That's a principal argument.
Sure.
We don't even emit 1%. Tomorrow, if Pakistan completely decarbonizes in terms of we're all totally renewable,
it won't
like
make
the
dent.
Parliament building, it's totally renewable. I mean, it's green.
Yeah.
But we still won't change. We'll still feel 45 degrees to 53 degrees in the summer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So clearly the global architecture, and I like the quotation from Mia Motley, I think, she says that the global architecture wasn't built for the global south. It was built for a different era to achieve different objectives. I wonder if, it's very clear to me, for example, that as a federal minister, you probably get asked a lot about things that should be happening at the district and the divisional level, things that should be happening at the provincial level. So I'm not going to bore you with a question about why something isn't happening in terms of adaptation downstream, whether in Sindh or in KP. But I think there is a question or maybe a wonderment that I have in terms of, is the architecture of Pakistan's government designed to deal with the challenge of climate? And I think just to maybe add some color to that question, it seems to me two very obvious places where climate should be centralized. One is national security, because you mentioned oceans, and I think about what is happening to the oceans vis-a-vis what's happening to our glaciers. And those are essential to Pakistani national security. Similarly, you think about the debt distress that we are in right now, and climate financing could be a principal instrument to drive down Pakistan's debt, but I don't really see Pakistan's economists or its, economy pages in the newspapers or people in government that are responsible for that seized by climate. Now, is that just a generational issue, an attention issue, or are there architectural issues in terms of how government in Pakistan is structured? And what might we imagine more climate adaptive government to look like if we were to think 20 years down the road?
Taking revenge for some editing I must have done on his staff, because he's asked me like 4 questions in one. But thank you, Musharraf. Those are not just complex, but important questions. Pakistan's adaptive capacity is extremely important downstream, because we have been, because climate is led by science, and it's led generally as a discourse from the United Nations, whom I commend for setting very high goals, but it's as good as its memberships, right, or its funders. So that brings us back to the same country, whereas also you need to know that the state of global public financing is in serious shambles. I mean, there's a debt ceiling crisis in the United States as well. So it's in shambles, and nobody has the money anymore, with climate crises and emergencies striking their economies, their local areas, the flooding, all of that. Everywhere you go, you see it. And when they look at the cascade of priorities they have to work with, they say, well, Madam Minister, you're absolutely right, but I have to finance my disaster risk management first, because look what's happening in our own backyard. And all the forest fires, which tornadoes, forest fires, and all of that, and the flooding that is changing how people think about climate change. So back at home, I think we've made an important decision and sort of reset in our thinking, because this is about reimagining, and I think a lot needs to be reimagined. Our own governance, I wish you had a total session on that. I'd be very happy to do that with you someday. I know you have many frustrations on that, on how our governance structures run. So, but barring that, the larger architecture of setting adaptation goals as a priority is a real struggle internationally, because despite every bumper sticker, and I say this to them now very clearly, don't say, for instance, COP28, one of the big, leading thoughts about it by its entire thought leadership is leave no one behind. A very old UN ambition, right? Leave no one behind, be inclusive. Don't, let just the privileged benefit from change, which is the natural order of how markets work. So they're compensating for that. Leave no one behind. I mean, I said this, UAE is going to lead it. I said, you're putting this up as a cliche repeatedly while leaving more and more people behind globally. That is what climate change is doing. It is ensuring that all security, economic, and development vectors are multiplied. So, if you have a growing population, which we do, unchecked almost, it will magnify those effects. And you have to start thinking, if there's a water scarcity issue coming up, that will become worse because climate is compounding it. Your own consumption may be, high consumption may be compounding it, but so is climate. So with our glacial melt, which you mentioned, it's 300 times what it used to be, and it's obviously in severe strategic frameworks of alignment with how we think, but honestly, you're quite right. It is deeply frustrating to even get a newspaper, let alone a television interview, on only climate change. They're not interested. I have just issued a statement which I, barely thought about. It's just something that was very day-to-day, par for the course. It was politics, and it's running in every bulletin. Every bulletin, it keeps repeating. Rehman said this. Whereas when I tell them that this is what's going to happen 5 years down the line, this is what's going to happen this year down the line, and 10 years, that's too much to think about, then that's not going to play. I will have to phone, say Musharraf is running a channel, I have to phone him. I'd say, Musharraf, think of your kids. Think of yourself next year, and please run this. And if you don't want my name in it, take it out. Make it anyone saying this. But please, up the discourse on climate and its action, because, governments need partnerships to be effective anywhere in the world. It's only in Pakistan we think of government as a big fat nanny that will look after all our needs and can be also told off or fired if things don't work out. It's not how really effective governments work. You have to be engaged as part of, and especially big business. They run the wheels of many governments everywhere in the world while pretending not to. But lobbies matter. They have a say. They become rent-seeking or they become big enablers of change, right? And in all of this thinking, climate yes, it becomes episodically huge. If there's a flood, unfortunately, or a record-breaking event, suddenly everyone's asking, climate change, what is climate change? Why can't you change it? And a joke my husband likes to tell, you have to hear this, is that he's sitting on a flight and someone tells him, oh, Sheri Rehman, wo Times ki 100 list mein aa gayi hai. To unne kaha, acha, kyun, kya kiya? He's hearing this. A friend is hearing this. उसने climate change कर दिया. तो अच्छा, the guy says, very well meaning, कर दिया. The other guy says, कर दिया. He says, I swear I need to record this. And everyone's laughing, those who understand, हाँ जी कर दिया. So yesterday when the weather was salubrious and nice in Islamabad, I said, देखो, कर दिया. Now this is honestly the thinking amongst almost educated people. And there is a adroit unwillingness to change that. Call me when there's a crisis to understand what climate is, how we can change the financing talk, right, discourse. But when I'm saying let's do this, some of it is a little painful. Or let's say citizens need to change their habits, such as lose the plastic. No, it's like in another place. Let's just talk about it. We'll go home talking. I guarantee you tomorrow there will be plastic back on your table.
So on